Well, thank you for coming. Let me first say one word about myself. My name is Britta Hilber. I'm, in fact, head of a studio, but not of Moscow anymore, unfortunately. I left it a few years ago. That's why I can be here tonight. I'm now a head in the studio in Brandenburg, but still looking at Moscow and on Russia quite regularly, reporting from there. I'm very happy to have this panel here tonight. Let me introduce the guest and say a few words about how we organize this panel and the discussion. So, first of all, I welcome Mr. Dr. Andreas Schockenhoff. I think most of you will know him as not only the vice chairman in the CDU-CSU parliamentary group, but also, and above all, as the coordinator for Russian and German relations. He's in that post since 2006. He speaks Russian and French. No, only French? But I guess you by now understand a bit of Russian. Hopefully, yes. So he speaks French. So his interest in foreign politics obviously started with France, coming from Baden-Württemberg. But very soon in his parliamentary work, he realized that international relations, of course, are not possible without looking at Russia. So by now, Mr. Schockenhoff and his 17 points, which have been passed in the Bundestag a few weeks ago, are quite a household name in Russia, I might say. He's a classic bone of contention between Germany and Russia, but Mr. Schockenhoff refuses to be chewed by the contenders and is quite happy to have his say tonight here in the Hertie School of Governance. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
On the other side, Mr. Franz Tönnes from the SPD. He's born in Essen in West Germany, but he now represents a very northern constituency, and therefore it is quite natural for him to look at the Baltic Sea and therefore to Russia. That's how his interest in this country comes about. Before joining the Bundestag, he was quite active in trade union work, which is still reflected in his political work today. As Mr. Schockenhoff, he participated in the recent Petersburg in the Petersburg Dialogue, yes, in the group of civil society. And he tells me that, or you might have known that Mr. Tönnes and his parliamentary group also made a proposition in the Bundestag, what points should be taken into account by the German government when meeting with Putin and his government. There were even more points than Mr. Schockenhoff advised, but less worded a bit more diplomatically, I could say. So thank you very much for coming. I'm very happy to see here Mr. Fyodor Lukyanov, who I've known for quite a few years now. Interviewed him quite a few times when corresponded in Moscow. He's the editor-in-chief of Russia and Global Affairs, which is, I could say, the Russian version of Foreign Affairs, an independent, specialized publication on, as it says, Foreign Affairs, Global Affairs. In previous position, he was a journalist and editor or senior editor in various radio stations and newspapers, among others, Sivonya, Vremya, and Vremya Novosti. He speaks German, but doesn't like to admit it. And he's quite well known as a level-headed, cool-headed analyst to all foreign journalists in Moscow. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have here Ingo Manteuffel from the Deutsche Welle. He calls himself a classic Western German, he said today, born and bred in Cologne. He made his Abitur in 1989, 1990, and he said at that time it was quite natural to be interested in Eastern Europe. And that's how he started studying Eastern European history and politics and Slavistic sciences. And after that, worked as a freelance journalist, among others, for the publication Osteuropa. Since 2000, he works for Deutsche Welle. He headed the online and radio department for Russia, and later, since 2009, the department for Eastern Europe. So thank you very much for coming and joining us. Now, what's the idea of such a panel? It is, of course, not only to listen for you and to talk, but to talk and to listen on both sides. It is to discuss and think. So therefore, I would like to ask all participants to be precise and short, and that everybody can have a say. And I'd be very happy to take questions after the first or 2 rounds of questions and answers here on the panel. I'd like to invite you to participate in this discussion and to have your say. I have to say, unfortunately, that we have a restriction in time. Both Mr. Tönnis and Mr. Schockenhoff will have to leave for a voting in Parliament, so we will finish quite punctual at around 7:30. Now, today is a day when I looked up in the agency what news comes up on Russia. You will have noticed that the law on the NGOs registering as foreign agents has come into force today. Today as well, Memorial has noted a new graffiti on its house saying, foreign agent, I love USA. On the other hand, we have new contracts coming up between the EU and Russia to continue cooperation in space, and Volkswagen cannot produce enough cars in Kaluga to quench Russian demand. There is plenty of opportunity to see the links between Russia and the West when you type in Syria, Palestine, Iran, or missile defense, or, after all, Pussy Riot, civil society, words like that. Now, Mr. Schockenhoff, you recently have been to Moscow. I wonder if you feel that the debate around your person and your 17 points has been a productive one for the relationship between the Russian government and the West.
It is not a discussion about my person. It is not a discussion coming from outside. It is, first of all, an intra-Russian discussion about the relationship between state and society. And we had, you mentioned it already, 3 amendments in the German Bundestag, one by the Green Party, by the Social Democratic Party, and by the 2 coalition partners. And we very broadly agree that we have an other conception of modernization than it is defined by the current Russian government or leadership. For us, modernization is more than technological innovation of the existing industry. Modernization is comprehensive. Without the contribution of civil society, without competition of ideas, without benchmarks, without rule of law, modernization in a country is not possible. And that was the discussion about. And the examples you gave as introduction show very clearly that this is a discussion which is taking place in Russia itself. And this is very encouraging because this shows that Russia is a very important partner whom we share interests in political cooperation, in economic cooperation, but without intersocietal cooperation, it would be too poor for our interests.
Well, that sounds a bit as if modernization would be a prerequisite to have a friendship with Russia, and modernization in a way that the West or Germany defines it. Is that something you can agree with, Mr. Tönnis?
Yes, when you see the different positions we had in the German Bundestag, there are a lot of common views in our papers. There is a difference between the Christian Democrats and us when it comes to the question of security and to the question of a better liberalized visa regime. But when we discuss now about Russia, I think first we have to say under the title you have put today evening on the agenda, I think Russia and the West, Russia and Germany, we are no fools. Yes, that should be clear. That may have been in the past. I think we have learned from the history. Today we are partners in many fields. We are friends, but in the fields Mr. Schockenhoff mentioned, we have some differences.
But a selective friend.
Yes, a selective friend. So and we have to bear in mind that Russia has another history in the past. Germany has also in the history some trial and some tribulations. Russia has a 70 years long dictatorship of communistic dictators behind in the history. And now the certain fault 20 years ago. And that is a very, very short history for development in the society and to develop a democratic society.
Mr. Lukyanov, do you think that is something that Russia really has in view, to be a selective friend, a friend in some fields, a partner in some fields, but not in others? And are these quite clearly defined?
Whether there is a position of Russia, the view which has been adopted, or just fact of life, we can debate. But for now, that's very obvious that we have increasingly interdependent Russia and global economy. And this fact will not be denied by anybody in Russia. Even those who are not happy about this, they have to admit that it's inevitable. And it's not an accident that Russia joined WTO now, after a long process of negotiations, but now, when the rest of relationship is not very promising, but Mr. Putin, who from the beginning has been the driver of WTO membership, actually, because this idea has never been very popular in Russia. So he is committed to the idea that Russia must be part of all international economic processes, and the next target, as I understand, for Russian government is to join OECD, which is now one of priorities for Russian foreign ministry. At the same time, Russian understanding of political development is clearly different from what Russia used to, at least formally, accept in 1990s and even in 2000s, because at that time we had conflicts on the field of democracy, human rights, and other issues of this kind from the beginning. So when Russia joined Council of Europe 1996, we started with a big conflict about Chechnya, and then it was, each step was with big noise on both sides. But all the time, Russian position was, we are not happy without your Western criticism. You should not criticize us because we go same way. We see same destination as you, but our path, our way, should be defined by ourselves. So Russia had different history. We need time. Don't criticize us now. Today's approach is conceptually different. Today's approach is, we actually don't understand why your model is right and other models are not right.
So they've given up on the democratic, Western democratic ideas?
They gave up on the idea that Western democracy, first, is now in a good shape. Second, that Western democracy is the only option which is available.
Okay, so if they don't want any democratic ideas, any democratic base, is it still right to press for it, Mr. Manteuffel?
That's a good question. I think we have to differentiate for the beginning. Fyodor Lukyanov is talking about the ruling Russian elite, not talking about the general elite or the oppositionists. I think there are still a lot of Russians who would like to see that Russia is going along the democratic path of the West of Europe. So that's for the beginning. Secondly, I think what is true about the changing concept in the Kremlin is that we should also change our perspective on Russia. I think we are still haunted by the perspective of the past, of the Cold War or the 90s, when we saw Russia on its quick way to the West, to Europe. We still love in Germany this phrase of Gorbachev, the one common house of Europe. But we have to accept that the Russian elite, the ruling Russian elite, and a lot of the Russian people do not share anymore these values. And we have to accept this, which does not mean that we shouldn't criticize them, but I think we should take a more pragmatic approach to Russia. And
which pragmatic approach? Do you have any ideas?
no, I think that's what Chancellor Merkel did in Moscow on Friday, was actually the right thing. She mentioned the criticism. She mentioned the criticism which was voiced before in the Russian society, and she said that we are sharing these concerns. But at the same time, she didn't crash everything else, and we are still in contact and cooperation in the economic sphere, in the space sphere. And I think this is very important to have this connection to Russia, and we shouldn't break it up just because of our criticism.
Can you introduce democratic elements through the back door, through economic relations, you think, Mr. Tönnis? Is that something that can be a way to do it, or do we really have to give up on the idea that this government will push for more democracy in Russia?
When we discuss about democracy, first I think there is a need to say what is the Russian picture of democracy in the society. And when we see some surveys the Levada Institute, for example, made and asked the society and asked the people, what kind of democracy is your aim for the future? And when they asked this question, 19% of the asked persons said, yes, we would like to have a democracy like we will see it here in the developed western part of Europe or in the States. A democracy like it is today in Russia, 15% said, yes, that is a democracy, what we would like to have. 48% said, we would like to have a democracy special based on Sovietic tradition. 7 up to 8% said, I have no opinion. And 11% said, I would like to have what we had in the past. So that is a very, very big spectrum. And in this case, I think we have to discuss with the Russians about the democracy. And like Ms. Merkel did it, to show what our democratic culture is, if you have different opinions, to discuss it on an open table, to discuss it via TV, to integrate the people, and to promote a controversial discussion based on the idea that we are two partners on the same eye level. That, I think, is the need we have to do.
Studies like that, how likely are they really to represent or the public opinion, or is it a way of asking people to get the result? I mean, I know another study of the Levada Center about the middle class in Russia, which is now more and more leaving because they don't see any perspective. Mr. Lukyanov, what do you think? To what extent is this a question where people vote on something they don't really, they associate with something like Yeltsin, the 1990s crisis, or to what extent is it something, when you ask this question, that they really talk about democracy as a system, as a theory?
Of course, many people answer having in mind what they experienced. And in this regard, what we had in the 1990s made a very bad service for the notion of democracy. I'm far away from blaming 1990s for everything, as current Russian propaganda used to do, but that's unfortunately a fact of life, that what happened at that time had nothing to do with democracy, and that was for those, especially for the younger generation who grew up during those years and are now between 25 and 35, approximately 30. They have very, very special views on democracy, much more special than my generation or older generation who had the Soviet experience. As for, you asked whether democracy can be introduced through the back door. I doubt that democracy can be introduced even through the front door, because all experience we had since end of communism shows that it's no way to introduce democracy where it doesn't belong. And especially in 2000s, we had a lot of unfortunate incidents with democracy promotion everywhere. And those success stories we know and we remember, almost all of them are in Eastern and Central Europe, countries which, how to say it politically correct, which arrived to the kind and mild patronage of developed countries. First, they introduced reforms to join the European Union. They joined European Union. And without this umbrella, I'm not sure that in countries like Hungary, Romania, or Bulgaria, we would have even that level of democracy which we have now. So in Russia, it was not the case. It was not the option. So obviously, Russia could not aspire to join European Union even in the early 90s when some people wanted to do it. It's due to size and due to many other things. So introducing democracy is not the question in our country.
Okay.
What is important? I think that Russia now is in a very confused state of mind. Because as Mr. Putin absolutely correctly pointed out in one of his pre-election articles, post-Soviet era is over and the agenda connected to this period has been exhausted. And this is very true because almost 20 years Russian society and Russian political class lived in the afterwave of the collapse of the Soviet Union. They tried to digest remnants of the Soviet culture and political psychology, and to prove for themselves, first of all, that the collapse of the Soviet Union did not mean collapse of Russia as a great power. But now we cannot use it anymore. We need something else. And what happens now in Russia, I think it's a beginning of very painful quest for new framework.
Do you think, Mr. Schockenhoff, that the German government will be contented with being a partial friend in the business sphere and the security sphere?
No, I don't think so. We have excellent business contacts, big companies, but we also have about 6,000 small and medium-sized companies who do not find in Russia the conditions to promote our economic cooperation. They suffer from systemic corruption. They suffer from a non-independent judiciary. They suffer from people who are from critical and let's say creative people who are considered by the leadership, the Russian leadership, as a threat for development and not as an opportunity for development. But this debate comes not from Germany. We are not the coach or the preceptor of this Russian discussion. This discussion is in Russia itself. Why does the Kremlin consider demonstrations as a threat for a modernization of the country? Democracy, by definition, is not a top-down approach. It is a bottom-up approach, and one precondition of democratization is competition, including political competition. And here is no difference between economic, political, and societal development. We do not fear a too strong state in Russia. We fear a weak Russia. And currently, what we have to consider is that in the last 5 years, 1.5 million people emigrated from Russia. That was the professional and intellectual elite who left the country. Alone in this year, $100 billion private property leave the country because they do not see a perspective to work with this, assets in Russia. So strengthening of Russia, really to use the potential of that big neighbor of the European Union has to be done together with the society and not against the society. A modern country, competitive, performant economy does not work with a complete vertical control, but depends on competition, depends on benchmarks, depends on competition of ideas.
I just heard some disagreement here on this side, Mr. Tönnis. When he mentions the not independent judiciary, I felt that you were not d'accord, yes, so to say.
First, I think we have to discuss, when we discuss about Russia, about what kind of Russia we are discussing. Are we discussing about St. Petersburg or Moscow? Are we discussing about Vladivostok? Or are we discussing about all these far away areas, which are not so developed as we've seen it in Moscow or in St. Petersburg? And also in these areas, the people don't have the same access to information and discussion and so on. There are very, very different pictures in Russia we have to bear in mind. And secondly, we have to look very concrete and with clear eyes in what kind of fields they made progress. And when it comes to justice, yes, there's no doubt we have no independent justice in Russia. The courts are not independent. But when we come to the economic sector and we are discussing about the independency of the courts in the economic sector, in the meantime, we get the recommendation from CIOs of different companies or from our Chamber of Commerce to place the place of the court in the economic justice in Moscow or in Russia, because they, in the meantime, have the experience fair trials, fair discussions in the trial, and good decisions. So, and then we have to say, if it works here, why it didn't work in other parts of justice. So that is only one example I would like to make. We should not criticize all what we have to see, all what we see in Russia.
So you mentioned earlier that Russia just needs more time. Is that, yes. Sorry, if I ask Mr. Manteuffel, do you think, if you just wait long enough, an independent judiciary, democratic elements will just come about somehow?
I think yes. I think Russia is changing a lot because we have to differentiate again. We mainly talk in the German press on the Kremlin elite and their doings, what they do with the political courts, and we all see these injustices and everything else. But on the other hand, the society is developing very quickly. Look, I've been to Russia in the last 20 years, I think almost every year, mostly twice, 3 times, and a lot more. And you see how this country changes, how the people are changing, and not only in Moscow. Of course, they are the first, but in the provinces as well. And I think we have to trust the Russians that they want to have a different society. At the moment, they are really confused because the old concepts of the past do not work anymore as a vision. If you talk to a Russian about democracy, he will go away and turn his face away from you, or he will slap in your face because he says, "Don't talk about democracy. You have not lived through the 90s." Although I've been to Russia in the 90s, so I think we need a new perspective on Russia, new words, something like more concentrating on rule of law, something like against corruption. We have to accept a lot of deficits in the democratic sphere. It's not that I am in favor of this, but I think we simply have to accept this because the Russians in the end will have their own path to democracy, and I'm very sure that they are doing it.
So, Mr. Lukyanov, only time will bring it about, and will it be the current elite or the children of this elite or the people on the streets that will bring about something, or is time not the question?
I don't know who will bring about change because if we look back since 1980s, no one major event which changed the course of international, national, all kind of developments has been forecasted. So no one could predict collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, collapse of Soviet Union, and even Arab Spring recently. So I'm absolutely sure that Russia is now entering the phase of profound change. Unfortunately, so far I don't see any indicators to guess what kind of change will happen. Society is awakening. This society, in the end, might look quite different than we expect. And even those protests we saw in Russia earlier this year demonstrated that so-called opposition, which is not the opposition actually, it was not an opposition, it was a movement without any structure and any ideology. People dissatisfied with the situation but without any ideas what to do. But even inside this group, we saw such a different faces from far right to left wing, from liberals to nationalists and even fascists. And for a while, they seem to be united by this feeling of discontent, but now it's over. We see fragmentation of this, which is absolutely natural, because those people cannot work together because of differences. Unfortunately, many groups in the protest movement, which I would say are gaining an importance, they are not at all liberal. Those faces which we learned from this wave, new faces, nationalists, Russian nationalists, or different kinds of left-wing activists. Russian nationalism today, this word, this notion, is completely different than we used to call Russian nationalism in the 1990s, for example. Because at that time, when we mentioned nationalists, we imagined those who revanchists, those who wanted to restore Soviet Union. Now it's completely opposite. Those who say we don't need anybody, Russia for Russians, and those feelings are, I wouldn't say are majority, but they're growing. So democratic Russia might look different than we hoped many years ago.
So Russia's on the threshold of something new, and we don't know where it is going. This is the right time for you maybe to ask one or two questions.